about to get started, everybody. Hit that like, share the show, annoy the maggot in your life by raising the profile of the show. Always helps, and always hurts in the best way. Lots of news to cover this morning. The Major's joining us in the first hour, and of course, Philip Ittner will be joining us in the second hour. So much going on. Oh, my Lord. It's going to be raging. As a matter of fact, I normally would give here's the thing. I would normally give a much bigger lead in on the show this morning, but we have so much to cover and so many news fronts to deal with that I just want to get started right away. Let me bring in our first guest, the Major, OJEDA for NC.com. Please bookmark it, like it, support it. Offer your volunteer services when the time comes, and if you can donate, now's a great time to do that. He is in the thick of it right now. I gotta say, he was being poked by his campaign people right before the call this morning because he's doing the work, and I felt bad tearing him away from it. But I will say that this, in many ways, is hopefully a way for the major to show his bona fides around these issues. So welcome, good morning, how are you? How's the campaign going? How are things?
It's going great. I mean, raising good money, putting boots on the ground everywhere. Today is actually a very rare day off for me.
Wow.
But I mean, in terms of like social media and stuff, we're going nonstop. Yeah, ish. But I get to stay closer to home. That's the key with today.
Right.
It's not that I'm off. It's just that I don't have to, travel 2.5 hours to any meetings or anything like that. But it's going really well. Of course, my opponent, Richard Hudson, he isn't showing himself in the district. He's the guy who told everybody no more town halls. So, he's recognized as that now. So, you know what? We're putting boots on the ground. People are seeing us. People are recognizing us. And he's in Washington, D.C. So, I believe that I'm going to overperform in at least 4 of the 7 counties. And I think that it may be enough to be able to compensate for the really, really red districts in this area. So we're going to fight this battle, and we're doing everything right.
Well, it seems like I got to say, it seems like Trump and everybody around him is doing their best to tee you up for a good run, because the maggot civil war that is going on right now, if you thought the protests and the fights that were breaking out over the big bullshit bill were something, holy hell, like the Iran-Israel thing, that is a schism of epic proportions in terms of these folks.
I think that we are on the verge of I believe there's only just a few that will give the people in Congress the ability to say, let's go ahead and move forward and get rid of this guy. First off, he is a buffoon. He definitely does not need to be the president of the United States. You have to wonder, he sent everybody to California when Gavin Newsom never called for any help. They were peacefully protesting is what it was. But once again, I keep saying to myself, why did they do that? And it's probably because they want to take everybody's eyes off of the Epstein list, and also the fact that there is a recount taking place where we pretty much know that votes were stolen from Kamala Harris. So, there's a lot of things that are going on right now that, are ugly. This situation with Iran, Donald Trump does not get to commit American troops. And I will tell you that if he does that without going through Congress, I think this is going to blow up in his face. I think that, they're talking right now that if we keep going down this path, we may flip as many as 50 seats in the House of Representatives. And let's do that. I'm game with that, because you know what?
Yep.
Put us in power for the next 35 years. We will fix this country.
Absolutely.
We will finally do what this country needs. We will pass legislation that will protect our people. We'll pass legislation that will daggone finally put a boot in the ass of Big Pharma. There's a lot of things that we can do. And I'm telling people, send me to Washington, D.C. Please let me be a part of this. Please let me be a part of impeaching Donald Trump, because I absolutely would love that without a doubt.
I agree. And I think if, clearly if we take the House and the Senate in the midterms, that is on the table, no question. As a matter of fact, I think that will be the primary thing that those that want to salvage Trump's presidency will be running on in the next lead up. And there's no question. Like, that's all they're going to care about. If the Democrats get control, they're going to impeach Trump. And this time, if they get the Senate, they're going to boot him out of office. And again, don't threaten me with a good time. Here's the problem they have, and this is, I think, the most striking thing that's happening right now, because everywhere I'm looking, and you know my job is to dive into the rectal cavity of right-wing MAGA, media world, and all of them are either dealing with their differences with the president, or they're getting marching orders from the White House to sell the storyline, like Charlie Kirk, like Sean Hannity. They're all on the same page, so they're clearly getting some sort of talking points memos from them, or they are fighting the schism. And most of what I'm seeing is that. Most of like the hosts that I'm seeing, I'm going to cover the Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson thing later on today, the whole thing, because I've seen clips of it running around, but I want to see the whole thing. But this is the majority of what's happening right now. Nobody should be confused about this. There is huge divisions over the bill, over the big BS bill that they're trying to push through. That they've just scrapped most of the SALT provision, which will lose them 30 votes in the House. I mean, it's that one thing would make it over. There's 10 things in this, including Medicaid expansion or contraction, that will, no matter which way they go, they lose crucial votes. They do not have a mandate in either of these houses. But the Israel-Iran story is blowing the roof off of all these shows. And all they're doing is complaining about the shit they are catching on social media right now. All the hosts that are for it, all the hosts that are against it, they're all catching hell from 50% of the folks.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and people need to listen to what I'm saying here. We should never commit any troops to any more wars while our government and the powers that be within that government are attacking the veterans' health care benefits.
Right.
That's what they're doing. I mean, literally, Donald Trump and them literally come out, and of course, it's not going to go anywhere. It shouldn't go anywhere. But we are going to allow doctors in the VA to deny care to veterans that resonate as Democrats. I mean, this is the kind of garbage that we've got going on. And now they're rattling swords. Donald Trump is rattling the sabers of war when he himself has never had the guts to pick up a rifle and man a post. Nobody in his entire bloodline have ever picked up a rifle and manned a post. So, this is unacceptable. Once again,
worse than that.
They need to go through Congress.
I got to say, it's worse than that. Because it's one thing there's a lot of families that just never had anybody in the military. This guy threatened his sons with disowning them, losing what inheritance they may or may not have if they joined the military. Apparently, Don Jr. at one time flirted with the idea because he thought it would be a good dick replacement or something. But he was talking with friends because he considers himself a hunter and a gun guy, and that was the culture that he was in at the time. And his father threatened all of his kids. Trump threatened all his kids. If you join the military, you're out. Because that's something he and this is it needs to be made clear to me. He views the military as a tool that he can use as president, but the individuals that are in it, he thinks that this is a welfare ladder for people who don't deserve to be in middle class society. That this is how poor people use the government to drag themselves out of poverty, and he resents it. He resents having to compete with these people, and he resents the honor and respects that's given to upper levels of the military for people who have dedicated their lives and, in some cases, lived under the threat of giving their life for their country, and the honor that's given to them. He's mad. That's why he always talks about giving himself the civilian Medal of Honor, or giving himself the Medal of Honor for being shot or hit with a piece of flying glass in Butler.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just a shame. And I really, it bothers me because I go to the VA for my health care, and I walk in and I see people sitting in there wearing their Trump hats and all that garbage. And I'm just like, you know what? Are you not paying any attention whatsoever? Are you not? Right. Do you just keep your channel on Fox? And of course, that's the reason.
Yep.
But I will tell you, like you were talking about earlier, and I really, really look forward to hearing what you have to say in reference to the Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz thing, because the clips that I have saw, I'm like, where have you been, Tucker Carlson? I mean, you're literally calling out. You're calling out Ted Cruz, and once again, I think that's important. Is that Ted Cruz knows nothing, but is
No.
more than happy to send troops into harm's way, but knows very little. Let me tell you, back in the 1970s, Iran was a free country until the Islamic group
Revolution.
took
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I will tell you that Iran is worse than Afghanistan. The terrain in Iran is going to be far worse. The mountains are bigger. It's just rougher. And you got to understand, we put boots on the ground. This isn't going to be someplace where we go in, kick some ass, and come home. Ain't going to be like that. You put boots on the ground there, get ready for another 20 to 30-year war. And oh, by the way, that's what these daggone military-industrial complex groups want. And let me tell you something. They will grease Donald Trump's pockets to make this happen. But make no mistake about it. Are we going to send our sons and daughters to fight a war that is being picked by a man who claimed bone spurs because he was too chicken shit to pick up a rifle and man a post?
Yep.
Because that's the path that we're on.
Well, okay. I want to clear the air on one particular thing. And that is that suddenly somehow Tucker Carlson has found Jesus and that he actually cares whether or not we send American souls into the downfield from bullets or bombs. Fuck that. No. This idea that he suddenly became a peacenik all of a sudden. Here's why he's against this. Because Russia pulls his strings and Iran is Russia's friend. And if Iran gets into a real dust-up, an actual war, whether with the United States or with Israel full bore, which I believe is actually occurring right now, the Shahed drones dry up. The artillery shells dry up. The replacement barrels, which is what they count on Iran for. One of the big things about artillery is that over time, the heat from those explosions that send those things over wear those barrels out. Ukraine, the United States, Europe make really good barrels, and they last a lot longer. Whereas Russia has this idea, like, we'll get them on the cheap, we'll burn through them, and we'll just throw another one in there. They're basically an extension of the shells. So don't give a fuck that they get them from China or from North Korea or specifically from Iran. And if Iran's fighting off aircraft using these things or stopping forces from other countries, not even Israel, but opportunistic Iraqi forces or the Saudi forces that are in the eastern part or the western part of the country that have been living there kind of under the radar, waiting for this day, that if they're going to fire artillery shells at those things, they're not going to have any left over for Russia. That's why Tucker gives a shit. He can use the illusion of peacemaking in the same way that these assholes have used it about Ukraine. They're all like, like Trump's business, I just want people to stop dying. No, you don't. You want Russians to stop dying. You couldn't give a rat's ass about the Ukrainians, or you would have driven them out in the first place, because it's not their land. The Russians, again, I'm always on the side of whatever side that if they put their guns down, they would be wiped out. Those are the good guys. That's how you know in a battle like this. If the other side put their guns down, the war's over. They're the bad guys. That's who they are. Yeah, that's the circumstance. And that's what Russia is right now. And that's why Tucker Carlson gives a shit. Full stop.
Well, I believe that, right now Israel is doing everything in their power to try to get us to join this war. And it's absolutely unacceptable. We should not be committing American troops to any of this. We have just come off of 20 years worth of war. And you know what? We've lost a significant amount of troops, but we have brought back millions of Americans that now struggle daily with PTSD. Yep. And while our Veterans Administration is under attack, this is not the time for us to try to commit more troops to combat, because once again, right now what we're watching is Donald Trump and them going back on the promise that said, if I send you into combat, and I break you, I will fix you when you come home. And that right there, the things that are going on in the Veterans Administration, this is unacceptable. I hate this, and people just don't understand that. This doesn't end overnight. This will drag on for decades and will cost us trillions of dollars. We just cannot continue to keep doing this.
Agreed. And again, I don't think that Trump thinks at this point that it'll be any more than a bombing campaign on behalf of Israel, and that if troops go in, it will be Mossad and Israeli forces into Iran doing this. This is, I think, I guarantee this is what they're throwing around in the Situation Room or wherever the fuck he's meeting with them at Doral over chocolate cake where everybody can fucking hear it. Whatever, right? They're not talking about U.S. troops on the ground. What they're talking about is they want our bunker busters, and they think, and the distance is like the longer the maggot world hedges on Trump either using that or giving them that, or they do these major attacks, the longer this draws out, the more civilian casualties there will be. And the question is, does Trump think that makes him look more macho, or does a big bombing look more macho? That's what he's deciding on. That he doesn't understand any of the complexities of the issues. He certainly doesn't. And again, what he's looking at, okay, as bad as his poll numbers are, George W. Bush, who got us into the Iraq and the Afghanistan wars, his poll numbers were shit for a long time too. And partly it's Trump's responsibility by being worse. But Bush 2's numbers have gone up, and he's seen as genteel by comparison, and he's the guy who got us into these wars. So Trump's decision long term, if he wants to, everybody's talking about the attack on his legacy. So, all MAGA right now is this will ruin his legacy. I've seen clips of it all over the place. The legacy he's wants to be is a tough guy. And that's the issue. Because this is how he's going to make this decision. It's not going to be based on a sensible, reviewing of the details of this one circumstance. It's all about him. Always has been.
Yeah, and let me tell you, this will not end well, and he's not paying attention. If you understand right now that we have troops in Kuwait, in Djibouti, in Iraq, in Syria, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in the United Arab Emirates, in Jordan, we've got troops all over those areas that don't have iron domes around them.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something, that is low-hanging fruit. If we get into this, that's low-hanging fruit for Iran.
Right.
And make no mistake about it, you don't have to commit troops. If all, Donald Trump said, we are now in control of the airspace. If we're now in control of the airspace over Iran, that tells us that Donald Trump has committed forces without asking or speaking with anybody.
That's right.
And once again, it's not like, somebody has struck American troops. This right here is Donald Trump basically trying to get it. But the thing is that now if they strike because they found out that our B-2 bombers are dropping bunker busters, if they find that our aircraft are the ones that are having air superiority, then why wouldn't Iran lash out at those places right there? This is very, very dangerous, and Donald Trump doesn't think about the second, third order effects of the things that he says and the things that he does. And
you could have stopped it. Doesn't think. But yeah,
you're right. I mean, this is not going to be a war that we just show up, help out, and then get out. This will end up being a 20-year slugfest. And if we put boots on the ground in Iran does have a military. And I don't think that their military can hang with our military. I don't. But remember, this is the problem with that. The moment that the military is defeated, what's left of the military and the civilian population goes into an insurgency. And I don't care how many boots you put on the ground, the insurgency will last forever. If we would still be in Afghanistan, we would still be in Iran. Iraq, if we just didn't pull out. That's a fact. And make no mistake about it, the military-industrial complex wishes that we still were. Because once again, we were building roads in places where they have 2 donkeys and a cart. But it doesn't really matter. It's all about the money, and it's all about, making sure that we're over there forever. And that's what this is. And it's unacceptable. Donald Trump is a buffoon. And I really wish that the members of Congress, those in the House, those in the Senate, I really wish that they would wake up and start realizing that Donald Trump is not a tough guy. Donald Trump is not a person that deserves to be in this position. They're literally talking about taking or hiring people from like PBS to put together Donald Trump's morning briefings.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes it more cartoonish. So it might be able to keep his attention. He's not even getting out of bed. He's not even going to his morning meetings.
Yeah, and we've
that
seen
give
this
him all the
before.
information.
This is
Yeah.
George W. Bush all over again, but like, an order of magnitude higher. You know what? Like, there is no headline sums up both the rift in MAGA and Donald Trump's completely being out of his depth in terms of Iraq more than this headline. I got to show you this right here. Trump boasts, "Nobody knows what I'm doing," as MAGA civil war rages. That in and of itself, nobody knows what I'm doing. He's not just talking about them. He's talking about Hegseth. He's talking about the Joint Chiefs. He's talking about, was it Kulczyk or the guy who's basically running, I'm going to blitz his name, but and certainly not Tulsi Gabbard. So apparently, this is the other one too. Incensed Trump clashes with spy chief who posts cryptic warning. And again, cryptic warning. This was her video that we looked at a couple of, last week about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which was this kind of like, it was seen as an audience of one video for Trump to kind of circumvent the right wingers around him. And Tulsi was not invited to the Camp David meeting. She is not in, she's the DNI. And they're not inviting her to these meetings because Trump is having a pissing contest about this with her. Yeah.
This whole entire administration is an absolute joke.
Yeah.
I mean, the racism, the just the stupidity with these people. I think that I guess Donald Trump is definitely not happy about his garbage parade. And apparently Hegseth is catching all kinds of hell about it.
Yeah, he reamed out Hegseth over it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if Hegseth gets kicked to the curb, all because Donald Trump's birthday parade wasn't what he thought it was going to be.
Whatever it takes,
let me tell
man.
you something. Yeah, let me tell you something. Every single soldier in the military knows how to march. And let me tell you something. It doesn't take more than a 30-minute quick, up to snuff to where every single one of our soldiers can march just as good as anybody else. Now, we don't march like they do in China and in North Korea like this. We don't. But make no mistake about it, we can stay in step. We can look absolutely sharp. I am telling you that putting soldiers on buses where they had to drive for 2 days to get to Washington, D.C., because they wanted people from every installation, by the way. Mm-hmm. And you saw those soldiers, they wasn't marching at all. They were basically quick step march, and you just walk. Yeah. And you could tell they wasn't fired up. Nothing was crisp. You saw salutes where it was almost like an accordion. Yeah. Let me tell you, that right there told me that there's not one person in that group that's happy about being there. Because once again, this is a dictator's parade. And everybody in America, especially in the military, understands that. And you know what? Yeah, Donald Trump and them, just the things that they do, showed up down here at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then immediately established a merch station where soldiers could buy Donald Trump white privilege cards. Yeah. And then, of course, all his other garbage made in China. What gets me is that there's never no pushback with these Republicans. There's never no pushback, and they will be the worst versions of themselves. Everybody wants to scream about Democrats, but good Lord, you've got Mike Lee basically posting garbage after a legislator and his wife was murdered, and then today all our prayers are to. Yeah, all of our prayers are to Kristi Noem.
Right?
What did her lip bust open from too much filler? I don't know. I'm like, well, how did she end up in hospital? Maybe she hit her head when her night vision goggles when the batteries died, or maybe she fell off of a horse while she was playing cowgirl, or maybe she shot herself in the foot while she was playing Ice Agent. That's where we're at.
Maybe she's allergic to her own stupidity and had a flare up. Either way, yeah, the idea that Mike Lee is like, our thoughts and prayers to her, and it's fairly opaque. I will say that while we're talking about this, Mike Lee knew exactly what was going on with the assassin. There was already a manhunt. They knew who the guy was. And for the record, just in case there's anybody who's like half-assing this, I would like to remind everybody, Vance Bolter, the guy who shot 4 people, killing 2 of them, meant to kill 2 others, but they happened to not be home. Voted in the 2024 Minnesota Republican presidential primary. He was part of an evangelical, charismatic church. He went to the DRC to I don't know, do snake handling, basically. He was a lunatic for the right, period, end of story. So, and I would say this is as much why he's taking it down. I would love to give Mike Lee some credit for being, finding morality after being taken to task by the people around him. But I got to tell you, I don't buy it. There's nothing about this that says to me that, Mike Lee suddenly came to his senses or started to give a shit in this circumstance. I think, quite frankly, that the news just turned on him. That was the reality. The dude has, it started to come out that Vance Bolter is clearly a Republican, clearly a maggot, clearly in support of Donald Trump, and what ended up happening. He took his stuff down.
Yeah, what I don't understand is that when something like this happens, they always push this BS lie. The Democrats did it. Waltz hired the guy. But
Yeah.
I was at the second No Kings rally that I was at, and I almost got into it with the guy who showed up. And I'm there talking to people, and I'm assuming that everybody that is there basically because we support No Kings.
Right.
And this guy is just kind of looking like he just had a birthday and nobody got him the right kind of cake that he wanted. So I walked up and I just tried to introduce myself, and he's like, "Nope, don't want to talk." And then I said, "What's your problem, dude?" And then he was like, that Walls hired that guy. The guy who murdered those people were Democrats. And of course, me and him go back and forth a little bit. But once again, you immediately run with the BS that they tell you on Fox News. And you know what? This is another one of those things is how many times does Fox News have to lie directly to your face until you realize that they are absolutely not a news source? Because Fox News doesn't tell the people, "Hey guys, we kind of got fined for $787 million.
Right.
We got another big lawsuit coming from Smartmatic. It's going to really hammer us too." But they just spew lies, and these people fall for it. And it's like, you got in your car, you drove all the way down here to No Kings rally because you thought that you were going to throw this in people's faces. Tim Walz hired the murderer.
Right.
And when the thing is that the guy was a retired Green Beret.
Mm-hmm.
You mean to tell me, as a retired Green Beret, you don't understand that it's more important for you to kind of do a little research before you start screaming and yelling bullshit?
Right. Well, and again, they can't. They've been trained off of that from Trump in particular. If you dig at all, it all falls apart. They know this, right? So the issue that you see over and over again is maggots have to live in the dark. They got to hide facts from themselves. Now, I think fringe people across the spectrum on all sorts of issues will pick and choose for cognitive bias what they want to hear and what they don't want to hear. And everybody runs, the more entrenched you are in an ideology, the more you will run from anything that even remotely sounds like a conflict. And I think that's a mistake. I think you should stare all conflicts in the face and listen to all debate that's there so you can see what's maybe wrong with your argument if you're trying to convey it, not with your ethics and your morals. You don't have to question your ideology necessarily even in that regard, but you have to go, clearly I'm not getting my point across to this person. That said, maggots have to actively live in the dark. I've seen these guys, on the PBD podcast and all this other stuff. We've seen them multiple times recently trying to figure out why in the world the Epstein files wouldn't come out while Donald Trump is president, and Pam Bondi, the former AG of Florida, who worked there when Epstein was there, why in the world these people would hide this stuff. It's so weird. And all of us are like, they were friends. Like, are you just now confronting this? And that's so stark. It's a great example of every other area where they have this problem. They just can't. Because once you start digging, it never ends.
Yeah. There is nobody that is photographed more with Epstein and that Ghislaine Maxwell. There is nobody that is photographed more with them than Donald Trump. And now we also know the fact that Donald Trump's not only on the flight logs, but Donald Trump had a yacht that used to go back and forth all the time to Epstein Island. And you know what? When you think about Donald Trump, you probably think he probably did that 2 or 3 times a week. You know, they don't want this information to come out because they know that Donald Trump is all over it. And once again, there will come a day when this stuff comes out. And when it comes out, every single one of those Republicans that are in Congress that were, there that when all this stuff was going on, I mean, they need to be held accountable too. I mean, you're literally hiding crimes is what they're doing with this. And once again, if the president of the United States has preyed on children, then he doesn't deserve to be hidden, and he doesn't deserve to be the president of the United States. And I think that when this is all said and done, we're going to, once the Republican Party is done with Donald Trump, and I'll be honest with you, I think that we may be in the beginning stages of them being done with Donald Trump. Right now, the Republicans are seeing the writing on the wall. When they hear things like they're talking about the possibility of flipping 50 seats in the House of Representatives alone, the Republicans are realizing that either they stand up and do what is right and maybe are able to save what's left of their political careers in the next election, or they keep doubling down. And when this comes to a head, and it is absolutely going to come to a head, they lose everything. And look, at the end of the day, I want to go to Washington, D.C. And I would love to go to Washington, D.C. in the majority, because if we go to Washington, D.C. in the majority, there's a lot of things that we're going to try to do. And let me tell you something. I'm talking about ending Citizens United, killing right to work legislation. I'm talking about helping the poor and the middle class in this country. I'm talking about making the billionaires finally carry this country for the next 50 years, since the working class have carried it for the last 50 years. I want to take care of police, fire, first responders, correctional officers, teachers, school service personnel, nurses. These are the things that we need to do. And if I get to Washington, D.C., and I try to push legislation that's helping people, and the Democratic Party tries to step in and go, pump your brakes, airborne, pump your brakes. Let me tell you something. I ain't going to take shit from nobody. I am a Democrat. But make no mistake about it, I want to go to Washington, D.C. and work with Democrats to fix our country. But if we get there and people talk about, when I become a senator in West Virginia, my first 60 days, on day one, they looked at me and said, okay, look, here's the deal. You ain't got to worry about nothing. Don't say anything. Just sit and watch. For the next 60 days, this is your session. Sit, watch, and you'll see how things work. And you know what? I was like, hell no, I didn't come up here to sit and watch. Right. And within the first week, I had pushed my first bill, which was making West Virginia become the 29th state for medical cannabis. And they all told me that you're going to make enemies. I don't give a shit about making enemies, even if it's in my own party, if I know that what I am doing is helping my constituents. And I ended up getting that bill passed in my first session as a daggone state senator in West Virginia. And let me tell you something. I go to Washington, D.C., I got plans. And anybody that wants to try to stand in front of me and tell me that I have to wait 3 years or 4 years before I can submit a bill, I'm going to tell you right now, I'll go nose to nose with them.
I don't think you're going to run up against that. I think, in all honesty, this has been a sea change, and there's going to be a flood of stuff. If anything, they're going to tell you, get in line, because a lot of other folks, you can sign on to their bills. They can sign on to yours, because there are a lot of I've talked a lot about how Republicans always want very small bills because they know that's how you get loopholes. That's how you work around the law. If the law isn't clearly defined, it's easy to find ways where technically you're not in violation of the law. But the thicker a law gets, the harder it is to jimmy it. And that's what that's what they're fighting for. They're not fighting for small government. They're fighting to keep whatever criminality they're involved in hidden. That's what they're doing. So what they're going to be, I believe, in the next round of things, beyond the impeachment move of Trump, which will be important, is a lot of people going, well, until we had an asshole like Trump in there, we didn't realize there was this gap in the law we have to fix. We didn't realize we've got to fix this part because nobody in their right mind would attack that part of the law. We won't allow it. And can I also point out one other thing in line with what you also said? I'd like to introduce everyone, if I may, to Chateau de Palmières. This is a resort in St. Martin. This is Donald Trump's property in St. Martin. It is a short boat ride from Jeffrey Epstein's island. Trump flew there all the time. You ever see a beach picture of Donald Trump? You ever see him lounging with his family? You ever see him anywhere but a restaurant or a golf course in one of his properties? You ever see him in a swimming pool in 40 fucking years? Never. I got to tell you, if I owned a place like this, that'd be I would be the most annoying Instagram asshole in the world with all the pool shots of me enjoying, the view and swimming and all that stuff. Trump can't swim, and not just because of his hair. Let me also point something else that creeps me out. That not only is this a short ride away, but this is their list. These are their photographs that they have on the website right away. And let me tell you something. Golf, food, tennis, man with little boy, food, two little girls lost on the beach. I don't know what the hell this is. Food, little boy. Like, where are the families? Like, it's almost like an ad for sex tourists to go be with kids. It's so fucking weird. Those are the first 10 shots. Not families, not people together, not dudes on a golf course, not people swimming. Food, which is all Trump gives a shit about. And, like, Jesus Christ. Of all the pictures, like, it's so weird. So you're not going to find Trump on the flight logs to Jeffrey Epstein's island because he didn't fly there. Because nobody did. There's an airport on St. Thomas and there's an airport on St. Martin. And Trump flew to St. Martin all the time. Now, the question is, where's his flight logs for St. Martin? Because I want to see who was on the plane with him. Who was he flying down there? Who was he giving access to Epstein's island? Was he, not a client, but a subsidiary? A worker bee, a partner. He would bring guys down and Epstein would, create the compromise, and then Trump could leverage that stuff out, that he fed people to them through his own property. Yeah. So again, when everybody says, Trump never went to his island, like, you have no proof that's true because he flew down to St. Martin and St. Thomas in his own plane. You're going to tell me he wasn't on one of the boats? Are there boat logs? Let's see those. And we only have the flight logs, by the way, from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. That doesn't mean we have all of them. That doesn't mean they're complete. Yeah. So just starting there. So because of your military service, and we've only got, in the bottom half of the hour, I do want to talk about the circumstance around the Iran situation. Because we touched on it and how it will be a Gordian knot at the beginning and how it clearly is a different game altogether than Iraq and Afghanistan in terms of the functionality of the government, the military, a unified force striking back. But at the same time, there are a lot of reports, and we don't know how many of them are correct. This is that Russia is giving these guys sanctuary, just like he gave Assad, just like he gave Yanukovych, just like he offered to Poroshenko and to the head of Belarus, the previous head of Belarus, and the head of Burisma, who knew not to take it and fled to Cyprus and got Cypriot citizenship, bought himself, Cyprus citizenship so that he could bug out. But Trump is clearly, he's sitting around with these people. This is the report today. That he's sitting down with the people and they are weighing their options. And I got to tell you, I have zero faith that he will make a sensible decision and that it won't be largely based on his just like desperate need for machismo and feeling inadequate in front of generals.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump is inadequate. He is an absolute buffoon, and he surrounded himself with an administration that's not qualified for the jobs. I'm still waiting to see the 22-year-old who has a history of grocery store clerking and gardening
Right.
in front of Congress answering questions on how that 22-year-old is going to keep us safe from terrorism, especially now with what's going on. Because let me tell you something, all bets are off now. And once again, Donald Trump selecting a 22-year-old child to be in charge of protecting us from terrorism is a slap in the face and will not go well. And I honestly think that maybe they want something like this to happen. They want us to get dragged into another slugfest war that will not have a victory to it. And me saying that we won't have a victory isn't saying that our military isn't the best military on the face of the earth. But you cannot win a damn insurgency. And this would be another 20 years of sending troops into harm's way. And once again, you're sending troops into harm's way while you're also trying to gut the Veterans Administration. So we are in the worst shape, This guy right here, I mean, goodness gracious, slap in the face. It's a
Thomas
child.
Fugate. Yeah, Thomas Fugate. No experience in it whatsoever. And again, what I will say is that if something were to happen, Trump has been blaming Biden for every mistake he has been making himself. I got to say, if there is any kind of terrorism attack, or, I mean, if we've already had them. I mean, I would argue that they missed, the FBI and Thomas Fugate certainly whiffed on the Minnesota killings. They certainly whiffed on all the people who've shot into or at the No Kings parades, the two shootings that occurred there. They had nobody on the ground ready to deal with a circumstance like that. No intel that would lead them to preventing any of this stuff. Now, I'll always give, people in the FBI and other groups, plenty of lead room if they were, there's stuff they've obviously stopped all the time. That's how it works. Again, every cop commits a crime by putting a criminal behind bars because the idea is that person would commit another crime is obvious. If they had done one, they're going to keep going until they're stopped most of the time, even if it's just robbery. So they prevent crime all the time. They don't just show up. But what I will say is that in the case of Thomas Fugate, if there's a major terrorist attack in the United States anywhere, there is no one that won't lay it at the feet of Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's exactly where it should be. You select a 22-year-old child. This gets me is
who looks like a French villain in a cartoon.
Yeah. The guy's a kid. He's a kid. But when Donald Trump was on that parade stand watching and Pete Hegseth was to his left, wasn't the guy to Donald Trump's right directly behind him? Wasn't that his Diet Coke guy?
Yes.
I mean, Donald Trump travels with his Diet Coke guy everywhere. The guy that was the one that was basically shuffling around the classified documents.
Walt Nauta.
Good Lord, man.
Walt Nauta, who became his, and again, if you're Donald Trump's body man, he can't kick you out. He can't. You talk about that, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Yeah. If Walt Nauta writes a tell-all book, it's over. Because Nauta's, his job right now is to change the tubing on Trump's catheter and do diaper cleanup like the other folks did. And there's no question about that. And so Trump trusts him more than, Trump trusts him more than he trusts Melania by far, right? This guy is closer to him than any person since Epstein. And again, the only friends Donald Trump has ever had is Roy Cohn and Jeffrey Epstein, two people who were both pedophiles. These are his only lifelong friends. And I don't know why that's hard to click in maggot, except they just won't allow it to be.
And I think people need to also know that there is a documentary about Roy Cohn on Netflix, and I forget the name of it exactly, but I'm telling you right now, wow, what a real piece of trash.
Yeah,
that
horrible human. Horrible. Yeah, and he was Trump's mentor.
Yeah, it's like he's like Richard. What's his name? the Nixon guy
Uh-huh.
with the Nixon tattoo on his back.
Oh, Roger Stone. Yes, Roger Stone.
Roger, he's
Right.
like Roger Stone to the next level.
Oh yeah. Well, Roger Stone is a poser Roy Cohn. That's why Trump
Yeah,
liked him
yeah.
around. He's the
Yep,
Timu Roy Cohn.
yep. There you go.
Trump has been pushing back all day about, when he gets asked by reporters, like, are you going to bomb Iran? This is a thing, because he can't declare war without Congress. But our security pact with Israel and our, allows some leeway for the president to do some stuff. And he will take advantage of, that's why I'm saying there's going to be all this, like, this loophole legislation that's going to have to be written after Trump is gone, where we go, oh shit, you actually can't trust that the American people will elect somebody who sensibly understands there's a line you don't cross. We have to draw every goddamn line now, right? And so he was asked by CNN, Mr. President, some of your supporters are split on the U.S. response. He said, who are you with? CNN. There's a split, though. He goes, fake news. Fortunately, nobody watches. Is anybody watching CNN nowadays? I haven't seen it in a long time. Some of your supporters are aware of the U.S. getting involved in another foreign war. He goes, no, I haven't seen it. Do you ever ask a positive question on CNN? My supporters are more in love with me today, and I'm in love with them more than they were even at election time, where we had a total landslide. We won by millions of votes. We won, okay. He falls back on that. That is absolutely not the case. He's underwater, and there's growing stress in magadom. Everybody can see it, and obviously, is he not seeing it? Is Chung and all those guys and Walt Nada, are they protecting him from the bad news?
Look, the enablers that are in Congress. I mean, there's a lot of people when this ends, and it's going to end. We just have to know how much damage are we going to take before it ends. But I'm going to tell you that every single one of these people should absolutely be held accountable. I think that, when it's time for them to run for office, I think that we should absolutely make sure that in their districts, Lindsey Graham has a challenger, and she is a doctor. And her first campaign video that she put out was absolutely amazing. And you know what? We need more people like that to throw their hat in these rings, because we've got to defeat these people. Lindsey Graham is no leader. He is no leader. There's nothing about Lindsey Graham that is anything other than bootlicking worm. Here is a guy who got outed by male escorts because he was making them all sign non-disclosure agreements. But once again, when they found out that prostitution is illegal and you can't make somebody sign an NDA for a crime, they come out and they outed him. Right. This guy is nothing more than a Donald Trump bootlicker. And, I really wish that the people in his district, which is, South Carolina, and it's one of the poorest states in the daggone country, I wish you people would wake up. Same thing with West Virginia. I'm seeing people that I know live in absolute squalor, but they still think that Donald Trump cares about them. And Donald Trump don't care about you, never has, never will.
Right.
And we got to get these people to wake up. We got to get these people to vote accordingly. And at the end of the day, if all else fails, we have to motivate every single Democrat in this country to make sure that everybody shows up at the polls en masse and votes these people out of office. And make no mistake about it, I hope that they get to the bottom of all of this corruption, because once again, I, without a doubt, will never believe that Donald Trump won this election. He was losing in 7 of the 8 battleground states one day before the election by 10 points or more. The only state that was close was Nevada, and Kamala was beating him by 2 points there. And the next day, he sweeps every single one of those states. Right. That right there is, that's crimes have been committed, and it's daggone Elon Musk, and that's one of the reasons. That's why they invaded Los Angeles, because they want to divert our eyes away from the crimes that are easy to see. And it's coming. And these Republicans, they're going to start waking up. A lot of them is going to lose their seats, but some of them are going to start waking up, and we would appreciate they wake up as soon as possible.
Seriously. There is we only got a few minutes left. I want to remind everybody, OJEDAforNC.com is the website. Fundraising is going well, but we're going to need volunteers at some point when we get closer to it, obviously. And this is a groundswell. This is a building thing. And there's a point where, you're charting in a way that will draw attention, from, MAGA world. And I think you more than anybody relished the idea that you would get to challenge these folks on, openly in verbal back and forths. So the go over, if you would, for the folks that are watching, again, for your primary focus for yourself beyond obviously dealing with Trump as the sort of affliction that he is. Beyond that, your goals, like in future for the Congress and for your role there.
I want to make it to Washington, D.C. because I really do believe that I can push legislation that is legislation that's going to help people in this country. I will tell you this. When I talk about police officers, firefighters, first responders, and corrections, I have the Veterans Administration. Uncle Sam sent me into harm's way, and you know what? They are fixing me when I come home. That's how it works for the VA.
Yep.
Police officers, firefighters, first responders, and corrections don't have anything like that. So I always talk about a 25-year and out retirement for police officers, firefighters, the same people. But the problem with that is when they retire, they lose their insurance. And without insurance, you're in a world of hurt. So That's why it's hard for them to say, yeah, I'd like a 25-year and out retirement. So what we need to do is we need to create their own separate type of Veterans Administration that deals with their mental health, that when they retire, they get that health care for the rest of their lives. Do police officers, first responders, and firefighters not deserve that? I mean, I think we all can agree that we love our firefighters and police officers, those that do the right things. I mean, we watched what happened on 9/11 when literally entire station houses went into those towers and never come out alive. Mm-hmm. These are people that deserve the best health care. Understand that I'm a combat soldier. I'm a combat leader. I've seen death in Iraq and Afghanistan. I saw death in Haiti that absolutely broke me for a long time. But let me tell you something. The VA takes care of me. Every single car crash where people die, police officers and firefighters and first responders are there cutting those mangled bodies out of those cars. Every overdose, every murder, every fire, these people see everything. And they don't have a Veterans Administration that worries about their mental health. And they deserve that. So we got to create something like that for them. I want to overturn Citizens United. I want to stop allowing billionaires like Elon Musk to buy our elections. I want to remove the cap on Social Security so that Social Security will not just be there for our grandchildren, but we could actually enjoy cost of living increases every single year so that nobody on Social Security will ever have to worry about eating cat food for the last week. There's lots of things that I want to do in Washington, D.C., but none more than opposing Donald Trump. And if I get there and Donald Trump still has 2 years, make no mistake about it, I will call him out on every corner, and I will call every one of his daggone enablers out on every corner, because that's what we need to do. Yeah,
greatly appreciate it, by the way. And going into all right, so I usually don't go into the world of premonitions or whatever, but I have a feeling Trump is either going to give the weapons necessary for Israel to use bunker busters or do it himself. I think the idea of long-range depth bombing of nuclear sites, I feel like he is going to argue that he is justified. And again, I think this is going to unpack very poorly because of his kind of, like macho bullshit talk mixed with his tepid response. So like it will just signal weakness both of ego and of strategy. I don't think that I think the people in the Pentagon are clearly gonna, do their job and try to parse this out and try to maximize efficiencies and keep, that, do what they're trained to do. But the decision is being made by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and arguably Lindsey Graham, I would say, in this situation. And it is being made, in a fever. And that's my concern. What's your thoughts about that as well? And let me check and make sure we got. Yeah.
I think that it's going to impact the United States of America. I mean, once again, Donald Trump is a buffoon and his enablers are buffoons. Everything that they've done has been a slap in the face. It's been an embarrassment. And this is no different. Donald Trump is going to do the only thing that holds Donald Trump back in this case is going to be Vladimir Putin, like you said, because Vladimir Putin doesn't want this. And that may be the only thing that keeps us out of this daggone war. But no matter what Donald Trump does, it's going to end up as mud on all of our faces. He is incompetent. And you know what? We don't need people that are basically ready to commit United States forces to another absolute train wreck. Let's just hope that we've got enough people in Congress that are willing to stand and oppose. And then if Donald Trump does it anyway, then it all falls on Donald Trump's shoulders.
Right.
So that's it.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, brother. Thank you for being here. Good luck on your one semi-day off. And especially back out there on the road. We greatly appreciate you. I'm a fan and a supporter, and look forward to seeing you in person. And again, we share the same birthday, which I think is so very telling about our nature. Appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. All right, well, give me 1 second. There we go. So it let you go. Appreciate it. OJEDA for NC.com. Please check that out. And I'm going to bring in Phil right here. Whoops, there we go. Yep. In 1 second. Phil Bittner joining us live from Kyiv. How are you, sir? Hold on 1 second. Let me unmute you. Boink, there you are.
I'm good. Let me
great.
reframe myself a little bit here. I'm a little too tight. There we go.
Right. There you go.
That's better.
So I mean, obviously so much to talk about since we last spoke, and not the least of which, of course, is, Trump. I guess the hypocrisy about their feelings towards Ukraine being attacked and their feelings about, the Israel-Iran conflict are starting to drive a wedge, because their description of Israel as being attacked by Iran through proxies and then directly is exactly where Ukraine finds itself, right? Attacked by Russia, which is ongoing and very clear. Never more stark, a battle, since Germany attacked, Poland and the Rhineland and stuff. Have we seen a country just kind of, all right, I'm just going to take this land because I see it as mine already. And yet this somehow was dropped by the maggots during all this time. And it seems it's at cross purposes to what they're, saying about Israel and Iran, of course. But ultimately, I mean, watching them eat each other has been one of the small joys of the last couple of weeks. Your thoughts, and of course, what's the latest in Ukraine?
Well, I mean, there's some commonality as well in the fact that, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Well, why does Iran want a nuclear weapon?
Mm-hmm.
Because larger powers seem to be able to gobble up smaller powers whenever they want, as long as they have, that saber to rattle. Otherwise, why would killing 25 people in a single attack on Monday go completely unnoticed in the West?
Mm-hmm.
Completely.
Right.
Yep. Did we talk about that? Was that headline news anywhere in the English-speaking world, especially in America?
Right.
I lived from Monday night into Tuesday night. I lived through 9 hours of constant barrage of Russian munitions, focused, centered on Kiev, the capital, where I live, for 9 hours. I had anti-aircraft fire. I had incoming drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, things that could not be shot down anymore because we don't have Patriot defense systems. That's my supposition. I don't know that for a fact, but I
Right.
have heard Patriots being shot in my defense in the past. And for 9 hours, I didn't hear a single Patriot battery firing. And by now, I know what they sound like. And now that's anecdotal. Kiev is a big city. But for 9 hours, this city was under intense attack. And the world didn't even bat an eye. Didn't even bat an eye. Was it on any evening news program? Was it the headlines? Or was it even a sidebar? 500 words on the sidebar of the front page of the New York Times. Was it?
No.
No, it wasn't.
I would say it's for two fronts. One is because nuclear weapons aren't at play except in the Russian side of it, so everybody's afraid of poking the bear, which is exactly what Iran is trying to replicate. And also because oil's not a factor. And so it didn't affect stock prices, those deaths. It didn't affect oil prices.
Food is. But
not for us, not for the United States. Right? I mean,
a
costs
major
might go
disruption in the food. I'm not.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I
am trying to make the point that this is short-sighted. A massive halting and obstruction of the world's food supply into the Horn of Africa and the subcontinent, which is where a lot of the Ukrainian food supply goes, is at risk. So even before we talk about natural fossil fuel reserves that exist in Ukraine, let's talk about what actually the world gets from Ukraine, and that's food. There will be massive starvation. There will be huge economic disruption if the Black Sea Fleet is completely shut off to a sovereign and independent Ukraine. But is that explained to our audiences? Is that explained to our body politic? Is that explained to our voting population? No.
Right.
This is Monday into Tuesday night and the corresponding hours afterwards. The world doesn't care. The world right now is letting Ukraine die.
Yeah.
These 25 people were either killed immediately or buried under a 9-story building that was collapsed on their heads. That included children, that included babies, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. Where's that? Where's that? Where's that news? Where's that message? And don't give me the excuse that, oh, well, we're having this Iran crisis. Well, yes, obviously I'm not saying ignore that.
Right.
But it's all one thing. And to allow Moscow to shift our gaze away, because I'm sure I heard a little bit with your conversation with Major OJEDA there. I've heard you talking about this. It's all Iran doesn't. The conflict in the Middle East, including Iran, doesn't happen without Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. Where is that discussion?
Right.
Why are we not having that discussion? It's
Well, here,
I'm swiftly arriving at the point where, Hal, what have I always said in this war about whether or not the world's support, the Western world's support in particular, America's support in particular, will stop the killing? It won't.
Yeah.
Russia will never stop until it subdues this country and recolonizes it.
Yeah.
And for us, non-support is an option.
Yeah.
Non-support is a decision that is being made by the Trump White House and to a lessening degree the Europeans. We need to talk about G7, but to a certain degree, we are not in control of whether or not people are dying in Ukraine, except for the amount that are going to die. And we can decrease that number significantly if we provide them with the means to defend themselves, and not only that, to take the fight to the enemy. Primarily defense, but also because ultimately Russia will never stop until it does, until it learns the lesson that it is no longer an empire.
Well, and I think
So
we're in the same.
that's the question we faces ourselves.
How long does it take before people put the Iranian-Russian axis together, that both of them feel that way about the Sunni and areas of the Middle East and Israel, and the way Russia feels about the former Russian colonies like Chechnya, like Georgia, like the Estonia and Latvia, and certainly Ukraine, and that there's a reason why these guys are friends. And will they put that together and go, hey, maybe we should start taking seriously the threat of Russian expansion, while we're taking seriously or trying to dissuade ourselves from taking seriously the theory of Iranian expansion. If you're going to start listening to the argument that the Israelis are making, or even that some that feel like we have to do something about it in the United States are saying, then you also have to parallel that with that. Well, then who are their friends in the world? Iran's biggest buddy in the planet is not China, it's Russia. And the only reason Tucker Carlson doesn't want doesn't want Iran involved in a fight with Israel is because Russia needs their arms. And if they're busy using them themselves, those Shahed drones are going to be necessary in a fight with Israel, or if any of the breakaway groups in the western part of the country, or in Iraq, or in Syria, start pushing back against them as well. I mean, you've got to, arguably, for whatever it turns out to, the new leadership in Syria is Sunni. It's not Shia. And while they make strange bedfellows when they agree on Israel, this guy clearly doesn't. His priority is not, Jews. His priority is Shia Islam, because that's who he was fighting with for years in terms of ISIS versus Al-Qaeda and all that kind of stuff. And again, a fight we couldn't possibly get in the middle of and solve. But it certainly points to the direction of where the fire is going to go. And so if Iran, picks this up and starts to, I'm of the opinion, by the way, that people are like, are we at war? Is there a war? There is a war happening. Israel is at war with Iran. End of fucking story. They have arguably been since October 7th, just through proxies. Now it's direct. And they've exchanged fire several times, and it ratcheted up. This is 1935, 1917, 1918 kind of, circumstances that we find ourselves in. That's how a lot of these things started. These little tit for tats that exploded into a fuller war. We're there now. We're there now with Iran and Israel. Like, this is not a 10-day exchange. This is not a weekend salvo.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could argue it started in 2014 with Maidan, and
of course,
the invasion
and I would,
of Crimea. And then of course the Iraq War and all the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, are we at war with Iran? I mean, here's the problem with it. I'll tell you when we're going to be at war with Iran. When we start calling up army units, airborne in particular. I was eyewitness to the buildup to the invasion of Iraq. I lived in Kuwait for months.
Yeah.
At least 3 months. Out in the desert with these guys, and the buildup and the buildup and the buildup and the build. American boots on the ground, which is what it will take if we're really talking about destroying the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Revolutionary Guard, and I mean, it's not going to be Iraq, but it's going to be we're going to have to call up hundreds of thousands of troops, and we're going to have to get them in position, and we're going to have to put them at some staging area. It'll have to be probably Kurdistan. I mean, and this is already me being like completely wildly speculative.
Right.
The point I'm trying to make with this is that we're not going to have an air war with Iran. The Israelis can do that on their own. We can support them. We can provide them with weaponry. We can provide them with AWACS and all the rest of it. But to really do what is the thinly veiled objective of a regime change and destroying the 1979 revolution and all this stuff that Iran, we finally have to end this. When guys in the Trump atmosphere and orbit, so this has to be concluded. Well, what do you mean this has to be concluded? Because
right. Well, there's the language around it is maddening because it's like, we need to resolve this, we need to solve it, we need to whatever, all that. Like,
can't do it with
that
an air
doesn't, and also
we cannot
doesn't
do
tell me anything about what you mean. Like by solving it, there's a lot of ways to solve a problem of a bug in your house. You can call exterminators, you can squash it, you can turn it into a pet, you can leave it alone. Like there's, you know what I mean? And depending on your belief about the analogy, let's go from bug in the house to stray cat to neighbor who plays loud music. Like there's, your options start to broaden in terms of the other person's, rational nature and their ability to control their own lives. So in Trump's case where he's saying, I'm done negotiating, this is, we're past the line or whatever. Well, that's nobody gives a shit. Because nobody knows what the line means. Even Iran, I would argue.
You're not gonna be able to do it with an air campaign. Again, the Israelis can probably do that on their own without us, especially with the Mossad assets that they have on the ground in Iran. And make no mistake about it, they do, obviously. But to do that objective, this whole thing of like, they're going to rise up. The Iranians are going to rise up because this young generation doesn't want to have anything to do with the 1979 revolution and the Ayatollahs.
Right.
That is wishful thinking at best. Yeah. And they are not an armed opposition. They're a bunch of kids that I say kids. They're a bunch of young adults that want to be participants of the global stage and they want to have a normal country. You know who the guys are that we will have to probably turn to if we really do this? Will be the Mujahideen al-Khalq. Have you ever, you're aware of the MEK?
Yes.
They're nuts. They're nuts. I've dealt with them. I have dealt with them directly because they went through a period of time of propagandizing after 9/11. In particular after 9/11. And any journalist that would do even the smallest story or even mention them in one line of a 3-minute, television report would get phone calls. I got spammed. I got called. These guys are, they're not
sane.
Tread carefully here. They're not, well, they're radical. They're fanatical. Yeah. They are so gung-ho and they are so aggressive in getting rid of the regime. And I can understand that. I know other people who are part of the diaspora who hate the regime. But these guys are nuts. The MEK, they were on a terrorist watch list for decades and decades and decades. And only when they became expedient for us, when the MEK started pushing back against the Mahdi army in southern Iraq. So the Mahdi army led by Sistani and by Abdul al-Attari, I forget his real name, the head of the Mahdi army. They used to tease him because he was raised in the West.
Ali Sega Genesis, I think was his real name. Sorry.
No, it's Ali al-Attari is what they used to call him. That's going to bother me. It'll come back to me later.
Yeah, but he was friends with Mohammed Commodore 64. Sorry.
The Shia population in southern Iraq, which were led by the religious schools in Qums in Iran um, uh, were problematic for the American forces. So
Right.
what America did, the coalition provisional administration brought in these MEK guys into southern Iraq and Basra, and they were widely rejected because they were nuts. They were straight up crazy. So if we think that we are going to, and that's why we took them off the terrorism watch list, because they were doing a job for us down in southern Iraq against the Shia population there. People might argue with me about that, but regardless,
Right.
they're not somebody that we can expect to be productive in any kind of regime change in Iran. They've been in the diaspora for over 50 years. I want to say probably 40 years. My arithmetic.
Right.
But regardless, they're not a viable alternative to the Ayatollahs and the mullahs. So this is wishful thinking. It is short-sighted. It is dangerous. And and all of it, I think a lot of it right now is a lot of bluster. People are going to die, so I don't want to be dismissive.
Flippant about it. Yep. I understand.
Yeah, no, but when we start seeing the 101st or the 82nd or the 1st Airborne getting called up, then we start.
Sure, they've sent the Nimitz and they've sent 2 other carrier groups over there. Mainly, I think to defend Israel. That would be to help shoot Iranian missiles out of the sky too.
We'll be running AWACS missions. We'll be running refueling missions. We'll be doing deterrence and stuff like that. If we start flying into Iranian airspace and making airstrikes and stuff like that, then obviously it's an escalation. And this administration and the current DoD are just stupid enough to think that might change the needle. It won't. It won't. To really do what they propose, they think they can intimidate Tehran into submission. And I don't think that's true. I really don't. It's not, we're not at that point. So what it will take is boots on the ground. And that means calling up the 82nd.
Right.
And what's the country going to do when the 82nd gets its mission? Because it's going to come out.
Yeah.
That's an airborne division.
Right.
That's going to be people, their wives, when they start packing their desert camo and their BDUs. And before that, when they get called up on hold, when they, because they don't just say, get in your car, drive down here, and tomorrow you're going to be in a staging area somewhere in the Middle East. They get called up sometimes. They get, and it's going to ramp up and ramp up. And when we get to the point of the 82nd or the 101st or whatever,
right,
getting called up, what is the country really going to do when we're really looking at? I mean, you remember the ramp up to Iraq?
Oh yeah, of course.
You remember all those kids getting told? Yeah, all those kids that were told, get ready, you're gonna deploy. You're putting you. And at one point,
whoops, got to freeze. Hold on, there you go.
Well, no, these things that happen in a build up to a war, especially in Iraq, it starts to take on a life of its own, and it starts to snowball, and it gets this momentum of its own, and when it starts to get to there's that famous scene in one of my favorite movies of all time, David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia, and in Lawrence of Arabia, there's a moment when they're outside of a small town where the Turks have just massacred the town.
Yeah.
And they're really supposed to be going for Aqaba. They're supposed to be going to the strategic goal. But there's one guy who came from this town, and he, has a blood revenge thing happen. and he
Right.
does this soul kind of charge at the Turkish lines, and the Turks mow him down, and then the army, the Arab Revolution Army, rebellion army, just loses it and starts racing, and and Lawrence loses it. He gets caught up in the bloodlust, but Omar Sharif's character is like, we got to go take that strategic town. This is not worth it, and we will lose a lot of people. But the momentum of the bloodlust and the desire for war overtakes the entire Arab revolt. And in the end, it destroys them, because by the time they do get to Aqaba, they don't have the manpower to secure this. Well, actually, when they get to Cairo.
Yeah.
But skipping through, if you haven't seen the movie, go watch that movie.
You should, yeah.
But there is something that happens when a country or a military force gets to a point of maximum velocity, and it just can't be stopped.
Right.
And we're not there yet.
So
we could be.
So as somebody
Trump
who stood,
will do it.
Yeah. So as somebody who stood with my fellow Nutria alumni to make sure that they did not put a bust of Donald Rumsfeld outside of my old high school, which they were planning on during the Iraq War. And I and the guy who created Stomp and a few others were complaining about the idea that they were going to do this. And I basically told them, look, the day it goes up is the day it comes down. So just know that about it. It's not going to stay up no matter what you do. So just avoid it. And there are much better people. Put a statue of Rock Hudson and Anne Margaret outside of the theater squad. Pick some sports guys. Put a bust of them in the gym. But leave this alone. And they didn't. But even as stupid and as belligerent and as I think criminally liable for a lot of deaths in the Iraq-Iran war, as Rumsfeld was, his whole unknown unknowns, unknown knowns and known knowns speech, which is not original to him, but he's the first one who kind of launched it into the zeitgeist on a major level, had some element of the awareness of that going on, like that. Okay, when something like this starts, you got to be aware that there's some shit you don't know, and it may end up hitting the fan. So as a SecDef, he was an asshole and belligerent and full of shit, but he was aware of the reality of it. Hegseth is nowhere near that scale of thinker, and we now know, right? And we now know that Hegseth is deferring to Eric Kurilla for all of his all the battle plans and all the read. Whatever Trump is hearing, he's hearing it from Kurilla. He's not hearing it from Hegseth's actual thoughts, because Hegseth is either too drunk or stupid or both to know anything about it. So he is, and apparently after Signalgate, he's having these little like personal panic attacks, and he can't make any decisions. So he's offloading all of his decisions to other people, including Kurilla in this particular instance. So when he brings stuff back to Trump, he can do the same thing Trump does, which was, this guy came very highly recommended. A lot of people said he was great, comes very well respected. And the way, what that is for is so that if shit hits the fan, wasn't my fault. You guys recommended him. He's not my problem, right? So Hegseth is doing the exact same
If the
things.
Tsar only knew. If the Tsar only knew.
Yes, exactly. We talk about this with Putin all the time, and Trump wants to be him so bad that he kind of is becoming him in that regard, or at least in the mythology.
And he's made the base in the image of Russian czarist or Putin fascism, Z mentality of like, well, it can't be the great leader. It's got to be the people around him. The problem.
Yeah, and plus,
if the Tsar only knew.
We just had
exact same thing.
These two strike groups that we put into the area around Israel were there earlier this year, and then they were pulled out, and now they're put back in. Like, this is, I mean, it's bizarre to send them anyways. But the idea that you would send them, pull them back, and then put them back in the same 90 days, like, these assholes got a turnaround order, and they're like, what the fuck is happening? Like, And now they're parked in the same spot they were parked doing effectively the same job because there's no thought structure at the top of the Pentagon. There's no thought structure in the White House. It's coin flip and polling. Like, and nobody, and, you know, I showed this to the major earlier, but Trump said, let's see if I can find the actual quote. Yeah. He essentially said, you have, no one knows what I'm going to do. That was his response. Yeah, here it is. This business. Trump boasts, nobody knows what I'm doing. Yeah, no shit, buddy. Is, you know, including your Joint Chiefs, including, you know, our service members, you know, and including him. He doesn't know what he's doing. What he means is he's not made up his mind. Because here's the thing: if nobody knows what you're doing, you could say that around like my general staff. You know, the 2-3 people at the first layer know, but nobody beyond that. But they don't even know because he hasn't made up his mind yet. Because he has no idea, because he's waiting for the big obvious sign of which way he should go. He's waiting to follow the North Star that magically appears in the sky. Because he can't make a decision based on the complexity of it and make any kind of rational, intelligent decision. So we're all just waiting for something extraordinary, some right hook to happen or some meteor to fall out of the sky that makes Trump go, okay, this is the thing. Okay, fuck that guy. He was mean to me on the phone. Or I decided I had somebody asked me to, Don Jr. asked me to try a date shake after their trip to Saudi Arabia, and it made my stomach go all squirrely. So fuck the Middle East. Like, that's, honest to God, that's what's going to decide this. And everybody's just waiting around for the boss to make a flippant decision based on God knows what. Yeah.
Well, we're not going to get regime change half-assing it. The Ayatollahs are not Saddam Hussein.
Right.
And they sure as hell aren't the Taliban. We go to war in Iran. And again, you can't, I firmly believe you cannot do this with solely air power. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be bloody beyond what we have seen since Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Vietnam.
Well, here's
Vietnam, but
right.
A different kind of fight, but the body count's going to be similar.
Yeah, and I
don't know if Americans are up for that.
Well, I know they're not. The question is, who's the people that the irony is, like, the rest of us will be like, hey, we told you not to put this guy in charge. This is how shit goes when you have somebody like this running things. This is just, like, I don't know, like, this is the biggest I told you so in history. But it'll be the maggots that turn that actually make a difference, because he doesn't give a shit. That's why he's rounding, he doesn't care about, like, visibly arresting Democratic lawmakers who are either protesting or asking that, there to ask a question. Like, he likes it. Again, we look at these things and we're horrified. He looks at it and they're high-fiving in the White House over this shit. But the difference will be when maggots finally sort of wake up to this. And the question is, will they wake up to it in totality or just in a single area where they'll just retreat from voting and not, or will the Tucker Carlsons of the world go, not only was I wrong about, our tacit support for Israel, everything they do, and led us into a war in Iran, and we shouldn't go in there and all that kind of stuff. But also, Russia was the aggressor, and Ukraine is the victim in this. This is one of the saddest headlines I've seen in a long time. And this is from the tower you were talking about that was hit, that my child said goodbye to me. Kyiv family rescued from destroyed building. A Ukrainian woman, her husband, and her 14-year-old daughter lived on the 17th floor of the high-rise in Kyiv's Solomyansky district on the morning of June 17th, Monday, or Tuesday, whatever. A Russian cruise missile struck their building, collapsing the entire section of the ground beneath the 8th floor. Oksana, Syria, and their daughter initially sought safety in an underpass near their home. At the time of the strike, they were sheltering. Were about 10, 12 explosions, stopped counting, and when they ended, we returned to the apartment. They saw ballistics still in the air. We went down again, waited, came back up. My daughter said, Mom, a little longer and it'll end. The warning is still in place until 5. But then a Shahed drone arrived. hid in the corner, two thick walls. Then a missile whistled. It demolished everything. A flash. We tried to escape in whatever we were wearing. Then a second missile hit. We ran out, opened the door. There was nowhere to go. After the explosion, we stood upstairs, called every possible service, shouted at neighbors to call for help so people knew we were alive, but no one answered. There was silence. My child said goodbye to me. She said, Mom, I remember I love you so much. Everything around us was burning, slate exploding, and we were on the 7th floor and no way out. We'd either fall, burn, or be saved. Emergency workers eventually extracted them from it. Oksana sustained a leg injury from the glass, but only noticed it on the ground after the medical examination. We thank God that we were not under the rubble there, not on the 7th floor. That's the most important thing for me now. Like, this is what Ukrainians are going through.
It's going to happen
every
again.
day. It's going to happen again. Right. And
it's going to happen a lot more, actually.
Right. And the only reason, and I can't stress this enough, the only reason Tucker Carlson gives a rat fuck about Israel, Iran is because Iran won't have arms to give to Russia because he's on the side of Russia. I'd love to think that there are these people who have suddenly decided that, we could give peace a chance and that diversity is our strength on the planet and that we should be open to the idea that these people, have something to add to the world. But that's not what this is at all. Russia decides who the target is for Candace Owens, for Tucker Carlson, for anybody who was on the Tenet Media thing, Benny Johnson, all these dumb motherfuckers are all following. They're folded in behind Russia, whatever they do. Otherwise, they would apply the same, if they're being outraged that Israel preemptively struck Iran, then why wouldn't they be equally outraged that Russia attacked Ukraine? It's absurd. And that's because they know what side of the bread their butter is on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
just
some
so
are fellow travelers.
Yeah.
Some are fellow travelers. Some buy, or they're useful idiots. But there are. I mean, Tucker. I really think he's in. I think he does believe in the worldview that Vladimir Putin has, which is might makes right. Of course, we're a great power and we can do whatever the hell we want to. And America should feel that they can do the same. It's just we should be more judicious. Because I think, obviously we talk about Iran and the connection with Moscow, but also I think Tucker knows that Iran is going to be a much more bitter pill to swallow than any conflict we've been in decades.
Mm-hmm.
There are Americans who have been obviously they have had their perception of how the world should work and global geopolitical stability and security molded by what Moscow says and not what Western capitals say. And there's a lot of this, disaffection with Western power and military power and colonization and, the entire history.
Right.
But what bothers me is that they're not willing to look at what Russia's history is and Russia's empire is. And also, again, and this is my North Star, and you know it well, is my adherence to the Lincoln quote. It's the Lincoln quote of 1855 that I put at the end of every episode of On the Edge is there for a very precise and thought out reason. It is because Russia's perception of the world can be very seductive because it is brutal. It is honest in its own way, even with the lies that it surrounds itself with. Of like, we're all animals. The big guy with the big club, he's the one that gets to make the decision, always has been, always will be. It's law of the nature, law of the jungle, and any kind of aspiration for anything better or different is foolhardy, naive, it's presumptuous, and all the rest of it. But I put that quote at the end of every episode because, okay, well, what's your alternative? What alternative do you offer? And the alternative that people like Tucker, who is a rich, spoiled little prick from, the Swanson family in San Francisco. I've seen their mansion. Yeah. I'm a San Franciscan. I've been up there. Nob Hill or Russian Hill, I think he has it at. But regardless, he's a spoiled little shit who's never had any adversity in his life. So for him to say, yeah, might makes right is sensible. Of course that is, because he's
Right.
never been the little guy. He's never been
right
the
now.
one that gets fucked over the
Agreed.
system. He is the system.
Right. But he can cosplay as such with all these other folks, and from a distance, stiff arm reality and make MAGA think that he's some sort of peacenik all of a sudden, when in reality, like, none of this ever happened, in terms of Sudan or any other fight in the world. It's only the fights that Russia is against, or, how he can land on the side of them every single time. This is, and this kind of generalized isolationist bullshit that he sells everywhere is effectively, cover for that scheme, because the active, again, the active aspect of it, we have soldiers all over this world that are engaged in peacekeeping that I think even Trump has forgotten about or doesn't pay attention to. We're on active missions, trying to save people's lives, deal with refugees, work with the UN, all that kind of stuff. You never hear a peep out of Tucker Carlson about that shit, ever, because they don't care. They only care about the fights that Vladimir Putin cares about. Period. I've never seen him get riled up about anything that wasn't first on, Solovyev's show or something a week earlier.
Yeah. Well, and anytime we can apply American power without repercussions to ourselves, he's all for that. But I think he even knows in the case of Iran, aside from the association with Moscow, he knows that that's going to be bloody. Mm-hmm. He didn't give a shit about the build up to Iraq. No, it's just he just sees the world the same way that Putin does, and to an extent Trump does when he actually does engage in thought and intellectual kind of introspection and kind of deep any kind of depth of thought, which is, I suggest, rare. But all the people in the MAGA world that surround him, the Steve Bannons, the Mike Flynn's, the Hegseth, I can keep going on. There are plenty more. They see the world through this perception that Putin shares with them, which is, if you're bigger than the smaller guy, of course you can eat the smaller guy. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is, right? Whereas, with the history of colonization and us having been a colony, which is why Americans are so uncomfortable with empire, especially when we engage in it. That's what bothers me about a lot of these guys that get their backs up about empire and their backs up about like American exertion of power. You have that second thought in your mind because you are born into a world where you are taught. I was taught as a kid of the really, especially in the aftermath of Vietnam, this really kind of like uncomfortable, like, God, we shouldn't be doing these things. And then, of course, Iraq comes along and you can make the arguments in a post 9/11 world and all the rest of it. But we're uncomfortable with empire because we're Americans.
Right.
We're uncomfortable with empire in the West in general because many of the Western powers still bear the burden. It's not a burden because they were, colonizing. Obviously, the colonies suffered worse. But it's Timothy Snyder. Professor Timothy Snyder has this, point that he regularly makes when he is delivering speeches is imperial powers have to lose an imperial war. You have to be uncomfortable with empire before, or you're just going to keep doing it. And the Russians have yet to learn that lesson. They openly say they want to be an empire. It is their stated goal to regain the Russian Empire. And that ultimately the Russian Empire must expand. First they'll take back the former USSR, and then they'll go for maybe not militarily, but power and influence into other spheres of their former empire, and they will keep going until they're stopped, because unless you learn that empire is counterproductive not only for the people that you're colonizing but for yourself.
Right.
And as a former colony, we have that perception. I would argue from the jump, but certainly in the post-World War II world, where we have tried empire repeatedly, not that we didn't prior to World War II, but
well, I would push back on
we're
that,
not
because I do think
we don't want to do it.
there's a distinction between, say, French Empire, British Empire, which is fairly.
Yeah, we took the Philippines.
Yeah, but we did.
The Spanish-American War. We
Yeah,
still got Hawaii.
Right. Yeah, Hawaii counts. Okay, sure. I'll give you a copy. But in the last, especially in the last, 200 years, as per se, right?
I don't like it.
No, and it's very different. Like, there's a difference between sending Starbucks and sending people down to build schools to teach everybody French or English, and converting everyone. And I think there is a distinction between this, and I think we've always kind of been against that. Even when we flirt with it, people get very nervous about it. So much so that they may even overreact and become too sensitive to it and miss that. Like, that's not what's happening, but it looks like it, right? The same thing we did with trade deals, like TPP. Would have been a bulwark against Chinese hegemony in the industrial complex of Southeast Asia, and opened up these other smaller countries to have partnerships with us and the rest of the world. But we're so burned on NAFTA, and rightly so, that we saw all trade deals through that lens, right? And that's where I think Republicans, a lot of them, find themselves, because the last time we got into a 20-year war that cost us $7 to $10 trillion, it was George W. Bush. There is no fucking way, and nobody convinced me otherwise, that Al Gore would have taken the exact same plan, that there's some fucking cabal that they all answer to, and that Al Gore would have taken us into Iraq and Afghanistan, or Afghanistan first. Like, it's just silly.
Look, Orson Welles makes Citizen Kane in 1941.
Mm-hmm.
What is one of the major satirical criticisms that he has about about Kane, who's William Randolph Hearst?
Hearst, right?
Okay, one of the primary things is because of the sinking of the Maine, which he turned. Wells shows Hearst engaging in American capitalist imperialism, and he's hypercritical of it. I mean, and this is in the 30s, for many decades,
right,
has been
40s,
considered the best American movie of all time.
Right.
Well, why do you think that is? Part of it is because many Americans share that sentiment.
Because of its appeal.
A guy like Hearst, is not cool, man. That's not what America's supposed to be about. It's this dichotomy in America that I always find so fascinating, and I'm far from willing to give up on it, but I do recognize the fact that these MAGA people, call them MAGA, call them America Firsters, call them the KKK, call them the Confederacy, call them the nativists. This movement has always been with America and has always been the push-pull of America. But one of the things that gives me hope for the American project is that there are still people like us who will always push back
against
on
it.
that bullshit. And we are as American as those assholes. They don't own the project. If anything, we do, because we're the ones who fought against colonization, are very uncomfortable with the concept of empire, and would like to see, yes, the spread of democracy, but I know that I am not alone in holding this sentiment, mainly because we talk about it ad nauseum. Not you and me, I mean the general populace.
Right.
It's because we're American that we hate empire. And again, especially when we engage in it.
Right.
That isn't normal around the world.
Okay, the other thing too is, I think the other play in this, here's the other play in this, and this is where the Russia aspect of Ukraine comes in, is that not only am I against empire when we engage in it, but we have a stark awareness of when it occurs elsewhere. And it is clear that Russia, from the start of this situation, even back in 2014, this was an act to use the parlance of our time, an act of absolute colonization, a retaking of land that they viewed as their very own, or that the populace that grew there is not real people. It's the same colonist architecture that everybody has been decrying, on our side of the aisle for quite some time. And yet, when it comes to Russia doing it, it evaporates. That criticism evaporates. This is Russian colonization. A modern version of the 1700s, for fuck's sake. And the weird part is they're open about it. It would be one thing if you were like, if somebody made the argument, Israel's actually trying to colonize Iran. You'd have a back and forth of like, well, A, they've never said that. B, that doesn't seem to be the plan. Why would they want to rule the Persian people that want to be, get out from under the Ayatollah? Well, none of that makes any sense. But I'm sure you could fabricate that thought in your head and try to chase it down. But Russia said it. They keep saying it. We see them on Solovyev's show. We see Simonyan. We see all these people on 60 Minutes on their show going.
You see it in the soldiers. You see it on the soldiers on the front line.
Exactly.
You get Russian soldiers captured. And
eliminate the Ukrainian people. There are no such thing as the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian people are not a real thing. Right. The Ukrainian language needs to be wiped out. The Ukrainian culture needs to be wiped out. The men need to be killed and women need to be taken to bring new Russians into the world. And then Berlin is next. Like, this is the most, and it would, like I said, it'd be one thing if there was like a Pentagon Papers thing with Russia where some pages leaked out that like, this is Russia's real plan. And people were like, well, I don't believe it because that's fake. That's not what Lavrov is saying. No. It's what Lavrov's saying.
No, they're not subtle.
They're not subtle at all.
Yeah, they're not subtle about it.
It drives me fucking crazy. Like,
so why is that okay? So why is that? So why did I go through 9 hours of fucking getting bombed on Monday going into Tuesday? Why did this woman have to say goodbye to her child, for fuck's sake?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't give them Patriot missiles because, God forbid, we're going to upset the Russians. I mean, and our objection to empire goes so far, and only when it involves Western European or American imperialism. That Russian European imperialism, we're just going to kind of turn a blind eye to because we're so terrified of the Russian nuclear saber rattling. It's just, we have to do better. We have got to stand up to this bully. We have to articulate to our audiences better why this is so important, what the Russians are really doing, and we can't let them get away with what they did this week by just going, oh God, but they've got nukes. Yeah, well then they're always going to have nukes. And also, by the way, what message does that send to Tehran? What message does that send to Taipei?
Or North Korea.
What kind of
ultimately,
or the DPRK? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you've got these things,
hell, we keep going. The South Africans, they could start. They had a nuclear weapons program. They willfully gave it up. But what if we're in this new world where everybody who doesn't have a nuke gets pushed around? Then every country's going to want to have a nuke. I mean, this whole thing is woefully poorly being explained to our population. And part of that is, look, last week's episode with Ken Harbaugh, we talked about this. And part of it is Russian disinformation. Mm-hmm. They don't want our people to understand what the reality of the conflict is here and why it's so important to us. I mean, Tucker just did this thing with Bannon that I saw, and I can't watch Tucker, but mainly because of that affected laugh of his, which he practiced in the mirror. He made this point of like, that's not my war. That's not my why am I interested in that? That's not my war. Well, stick your head in the sand as much as you'd like, but it is your war because the Russians are making it your war, because if the Russians are successful, they will keep pushing. This will not be the last stop for them. And again, then I get the whole, you think that they're going to invade Poland or something? They don't have to invade Poland. If they're successful in Ukraine, they will be reinvigorated and they will have undue influence over the entire markets of Europe, and that will affect us. We don't live in a hermit kingdom. Those days are gone. Our oceans will not protect us. This is all relevant to every single American, because every single American will feel the consequence if Russia is successful here. And why can't we explain that? I don't know why.
Right.
It's frustrating.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because you have people, we always talk about like active and passive measures and propaganda and stuff, and you have people who have picked up the mantle themselves. It reminds me of that old One Lump or Two cartoon from Warner Brothers, the old Bugs Bunnies, where he's like, "Would you like one lump or two?" And he'd go, "2 lumps." Or I like a lot of lumps. Give me a whole lot of lumps. Right, and then he pulls out the hammer and he goes, "Oh no, you don't. I'll do it myself." Bunk, bunk, right? And that is where maggots he no longer has to propagandize themselves. If you look on, their social media, if you look at the way they talk to each other, they are self-propagandizing. They will pick up this, like, he doesn't have to do a cleanup message anymore. That's part of the reason why they don't do it. Like Trump, usually you have a politician comes out, you screw with the base, you have to come out and go, "Nah, that's not what I was doing. I've got to fix this." They've now got these armies of people, sheepdogging people online to, get them back on board if they start to stray. Now, will there be a bridge too far for these folks in terms of a strike on Iran? I got to tell you, no. If the U.S. gives bunker busters to Iran and that's the extent of it, that won't do it. If we have as long as we have anything short of soldiers on the ground in Iran, the maggots aren't going anywhere, no matter what the fuck Tucker Carlson says. But the independent voters will.
Yes, but also if a couple of B2s or whatever F-35s, if something gets shot out of the sky, that might, because that'll be a real repercussion. But you're right. I think if we give bunker busting bombs and we kind of provide AWACS. And we do satellite imagery, and we, talk to our assets in the region, and all. If we don't get a cost, then yeah, you're probably right. But we will not get a regime change unless there are boots on the ground. And if we really are going for regime change, we cannot do it with the disaffected youth of Iran, and we cannot do it with the Mujahideen cult. It's not going to work. There's too much infrastructure there. There's too much military power, and I don't see a collapse, of the system there unless.
Okay, so So the by the way, we're about to end the show, but I want to remind everybody, Philip Bittner's got a great show called On the Edge. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and view every episode. It's a wonderful insight into stuff, very professionally done, and very impressive considering that he's in a war zone, literally, while this is going on. I'm incredibly impressed by what you've managed to put together there, my friend. But here's my big question. Okay, if these people are pulling from that Afghanistan was such a failure and it was so embarrassing that Vladimir Putin thought this is my time to go in, and that's why he attacked Ukraine, then why wouldn't the same thing sort of apply to, and Russia turned out to be a paper tiger. It turned out to be largely a failure, the second biggest military in the world. They were supposed to be this big, monstrous force, and they've shit the bed brutally. Over 1 million casualties we passed last week, and it's not going anywhere. They have learned nothing. They have not adapted. The Ukrainians absolutely have. But why wouldn't people go, oh, maybe the Israelis are looking at what Russia did, to Ukraine, where they were always afraid, like Ukraine was, that oh, fuck, if we poke the bear with Russia, we're going to get our ass handed to us because they're the biggest military in the area. There's a belief right now that the same thing has been true of Iran, and the reason that they've been building up their nuclear stuff is because They don't have the conventional warfare that they used to have because they have outsourced a shit ton of it, or are operating on kind of a skeleton structure because they have these pictures and videos of all these planes parked, but that doesn't mean they're theirs, and that doesn't mean they still work, or that they, or any of that stuff. The same way that we saw those Russian fields with trucks everywhere. When you zoom in, the tires are rotten on the vehicles. So there, could it be that Israel is going, we were really afraid of, pushing back on Iran the way Ukraine was sort of afraid to push back past the Donbass without the U.S. backing them to make a major push. And they sat there taking this shit for years, in the same way that Israel's dealt with it with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And you could argue that maybe Iran, maybe their thought is, maybe their intel is telling them that Iran spent all of its stuff on proxy stuff because they just gave up on the idea of conventional warfare, except for, at least a posturing force, so that it looks like it from the air. If you look at from, satellite images, but they could also say, oh, we don't have all these planes, not because we lost all our planes or because they blew up or we don't have pilots to fly them, but because they're hidden in a mountain because we don't trust you guys. And that, it's very spooky. You're like, oh shit, maybe they do have them. But what if they don't? What if they, like Russia, have, spent the last 10 years under the Ayatollah, or the last 12 or 15 years, letting that part of it decay while focusing on proxies and nuclear as their new way forward. And if the proxies have been leg swept and the nuclear program wasn't there yet, they're in deep shit right now. And the people who are calling for a strike might end up being accidentally successful. That's a thought. I mean, that's where my brain is right now.
It's certainly something to think about, but ultimately, you're going to have to take that territory. I do not believe that there will be an uprising from the 20-somethings, and I do not believe that the opposition party that has been living in exile for 50 years is going to do it. It's a funny thing when a country gets invaded, a lot of these, issues between domestic parties and interests disappear because you're being invaded. That's kind of what happened here in Ukraine. Not nearly as as extreme as the philosophical and political differences that actually do exist in Iran. But they've got a secret police that's been working in Iran, and it's been a repressive government for so long that the formation of an opposition isn't really possible. Ukrainians didn't have that, so they were able to raise a resistance and find solidarity. But even so, if foreign troops cross into Iran, I don't think they're just going to let it go. And the IDF, the Israelis don't have the manpower to do an offensive war into Iran. It would have to be us. Yeah. So what the hell are we doing? We're gonna bomb a bunch of sites. It's not going to achieve a goal, and then somebody, God only knows where this is going to go, and I'm going to stop, kind of.
Well, that's the problem. But
at the end of the day, we don't know. There's too many variables. There's too many variables, and war is a tricky thing, and it is a slippery mistress that will change on you in a moment's notice. But I still feel very strongly that we are not going to get regime change through airstrikes. We're, if we really want to do this, it's going to be a massive cost. And I know the American people aren't up for it.
No,
and
not at all. I will say that I think that is why they're
really confused about what they're doing.
I think that's why the talk of targeted assassination is on the table, because I think they know that. I think they know we know that, and I think that's the only reason they're discussing the assassination of the Ayatollah or the decapitation strategy is because there's no appetite for boots on the ground. And especially in an area where Iran, where, again, very different from Iraq as far as the populace versus the leadership. Iranians have had at least a better description of that. So you don't want to, you don't want soldiers there making more enemies in the world the way, with Iraq, they kind of didn't care, quite frankly. Bush 1 didn't care. Bush 2 didn't care. The rest of us did, but they didn't care if they made new enemies. They were just trying to wipe out a country, old-fashioned war style. Iran is not that kind of thing. So I think that's why we're hearing this talk about assassination. Yeah, really. Yeah, I appreciate it, brother. This is so much to parse out and stuff. Please be safe. If you have any
As
ability
safe
to
as
do
I
so.
can.
Yeah, that's right.
As safe as I can.
Listen to
But
Luke Skywalker.
that's kind of the point.
Yep. Listen to Luke Skywalker when he tells you to, beat feet and keep your helmet and vest near the bed.
I mean,
yeah.
there's only so much you can do. At the end of the day, if your card comes up, your card comes up. But
right.
Anyways, it's just the way it is.
It totally
All
is,
right,
and we
talk to you on
love
Saturday.
you, Phil. We love you, Phil. Be safe, please.
All right, buddy.
All right. Cheers.
All
There he
right,
goes,
take
ladies and
care.
gentlemen.
All right,
Yeah,
cheers.
appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. And chat room, hi everybody. Thank you guys for the super chats today. We did a goal, but it fell short, so that was sad. But it was worth a try. That's new on the morning shows, I think might be the reason why. But in that welcome, hi, hello. I feel like, let me go to the chat room over here because I can get into you. There was a question earlier that was for the major. Please ask the major why wouldn't Republicans file censures against the Federal Republican Conference leadership for abdicating Article 1 powers? Tabby asked that. I'll tell you why. They're all afraid of maggots and they're afraid of Trump. They're afraid to question him. They are, in the most pathetic way. Because let me tell you something. The people that are afraid of Kim Jong-un or Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin in their governments are legit. They have a lot of reasons to be scared shitless by the prospect that they might get on the bad side of one of these guys, because they will die. When Trump does it, it's like, you might lose your seat. You might get tweeted at. It's fucking pathetic. And so even the heroes among us, who stand up, when the Republicans are like patting themselves on the back because Thomas Massey or somebody is bitching about a part of the bill or part of the, strategy that they don't like, or this little bifurcation. The reason they are, good for them, I suppose. I'm glad they're doing it because fuck them. But I think they don't get the same like hero marks that the people, over the years who have done it in these countries have, by any stretch. Now, let's see. Yeah, zeros. Like, I'm not as impressed. I'm glad they're doing it opportunistically. It's good for Democrats, and also maybe there's some awakening that could go on there, but I'm not going to police that because nobody could. But in the interim, we have a lot of folks that are turning on Trump. Let me show you some headlines before I leave you guys off for the day and kind of run through these again, because I got to address a couple of them with the guests, but I wanted to show you these, whatever. This is, let me shrink this down. There we go. Trump is, Iran proposed White House meeting, but it's very late for talks. It's really odd that, the guy welcomed the Taliban, and, from his perspective as a misogynist, what's not to like about the Taliban? Yeah. President Trump said Wednesday that Iran still wants to negotiate with the U.S. and even proposed sending a delegation to the White House, but that it was getting very late for talks and he might soon authorize strikes on Iran's nuclear program. He has no idea what he's doing. Okay. This is the other story I posted. We want to talk about that. Apparently he's mad at Tulsi Gabbard about for that anti-nuke video that she put up after going to Japan, and she did it, apparently she went rogue. She wasn't supposed to post this, and she did, and so he's mad about it, and now he's no longer going to invite her to any of the intelligence meetings. She's not allowed to come anymore. Which, again, she's the DNI. Do I think she's necessary to the circumstance? Her deputy can't, is, I don't know if he's at the meetings, but he couldn't get Senate confirmation for another role. That's why they put him there. Yeah. Okay. This part is the part I think that I've been focused on, and I pointed this out, God damn it, at the beginning of the year. I said these two trains have left the station and they are heading towards a crash, and there is nothing that is going to divert them because they are based on inherent contradictions in both what Trump sold his own voters and what his own voters chose to believe. And this is inevitable on a Thanos level. Trump confronts a rare MAGA purity test on Iran and immigration. Yes, usually they will ignore all of his lies, except this one. And even then, whatever. Okay, 10 years after Israel, okay. Zoom in. No debate has proven more divisive for the America First movement than Israel's war against Iran and whether the U.S. should intervene to fully eliminate. Okay. And again, we saw Carlson and Steve Bannon and MTG fighting against Laura Loomer and Mark Levin and Tom Cotton. Boo fuckity who. Okay. Amid mounting signs the U.S. is considering joining the war, Trump says his fundamental position that Iran cannot be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon has never wavered. Trump even publicly smacked down Carlson over his criticism of U.S. involvement, telling the Atlantic, well, considering that I'm the one that developed America First, I think I'm the one that decides that. Yeah, good times. Vance said he should, he basically carried water for the president. This was the part that stood out to me. This is the Matt Walsh one. How Trump could completely destroy his legacy. That's adorable. In 2 easy steps. 1, get us involved in a war in the Middle East. Too late. You guys have just ignored the other ones. Give amnesty to illegals on behalf of the hotel industry and Big Ag. Womp, womp. Guess what? That's exactly what's going to fucking happen. That is exactly what's coming. Now, he won't do a Reagan-style amnesty because he's too big of a pussy. But he will absolutely give them a pass. He'll start doing this TPS, DED stuff around people in the hospitality industry. And basically, he's done it by giving ICE an order to call off the dogs. So, okay. Back at home, prominent MAGA voices. Ew. We're stunned to read Trump's Truth Social post that he suggesting that unauthorized immigrants who work in agriculture and hospitality might be spared from deportation. Charlie Kirk believed that every immigrant here illegally should be deported, with some claiming Trump's new guidance created unfair carve-outs for big agriculture. Some of the talk to Ron DeSantis about this. Yeah. Much of the backlash landed on Brooke Rollins. I don't know why she needs to be removed. Why the fuck would it be her problem? It's Trump's policy. And it involves ICE. What's she going to do? Cast a spell that magically creates American ag workers? Rollins hit back at the criticism, urging MAGA to ignore the noise. Blah, 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 who cares? Amid the backlash of DHS, reversed Trump's guidance, telling immigration agents to continue raids at farms, hotels, and restaurants. After all, and then whatever. And they don't know what to believe. Okay. And then Bannon warned his War Room podcast that getting sucked into a prolonged, it's like a signal chat. That's what it is. That's what Middle Eastern wars are like. They're like signal chats. You just get sucked in to a prolonged war in the Middle East would distract from Trump's most important priority, mass deportations. Right. We saw that clip. Other Trump supporters view 2 issues, helping Israel attack Iran and deporting unauthorized immigrants, as part of the same fight to preserve Western civilization. Yes. Western civilizations. Okay. Anyways, that's why Trump is confident he could bend the base long before it breaks, because they will always take it. That's just the reality. Another story real quick, chat room, if I may. Yeah. I showed this whole, Trump, nobody knows what I'm doing. Let me jump ahead to this guy. Hold on. Where is it? Where he attacks CNN when they're asking him about his do you ever ask a positive question? Trump whines over GOP infighting on Iran. This is, I think, Caitlin Collins asking him, or CNN correspondent. Some of your supporters are wary of the U.S. getting involved in another foreign war. No, I haven't seen it. Do you ever ask a positive question at CNN? My supporters are more in love with me today than I'm in love with them. I read that earlier when the major was on. Let me tell you something. If he hasn't seen it, he's not watching anything but Sean Hannity, which might be the case. He might know that he's not going to like what he hears, so he's avoiding it on purpose. All right, next up, this one. When asked about what he would do, whether he would attack Iran, I may do it, Trump bashers reporter asking if it was right. You don't think I'm seriously going to answer that question, Trump said at the White House, even on Wednesday. Will you strike the Iranian event on Wednesday? Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component, and what time exactly, sir? Sir, would you strike it? I mean, you don't know what I'm going to, that I'm even going to do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do, including him. Do you think it's too late now? A reporter said, nothing's too late. The only thing that's too late is Fed Powell. Powell's too late. Too late, Powell. We've totally captured the air, he said of Iran's airspace. Because, yeah. Then we showed the Vance Bolter voted in the 2024 Minnesota primary. And then, where's this? Here we go. This guy right here. Oh, no, wrong one. Beg your pardon. This one. Biggest U.S. oil stockpile drop in a year shows tightening market because imports are down because of tariffs and other stuff. And you can't just drill, baby, drill. Apparently, the drill, baby, drill is not happening. Apparently, that drilling is not occurring. There's no drill. There's no baby. There's no drill. U.S. crude stockpiles declined the most in almost a year last week, signaling a tighter market for for American oil, just as the Israel-Iran conflict threatens supplies in the Middle East. Well, what do you know? Then, there we go. Why did this scroll up here? Where did it go? That's the wrong one. Hold on. Beg your pardon? Oh, this is the Kurilla thing. So, Hegseth defers to General and Pentagon's plans for Iran. So Hegseth is afraid of making decisions. This came out last week. After the Signalgate thing, he's been showing up to work unshaven and unkempt and hammered, I think is probably the word they were looking for. But apparently he's so scared to make any kind of decision, he is deferring them to the generals. Now, when it comes to action, that's how he should do because he's stupid. But as as one of the civilian leaders of the military and how important that is in the United States, and granted, he's the least civilian of even, anyways, ultimately, these guys are going to make better decisions than he makes, depending on the action. It's him and Trump that have to make the decision about whether we're going to do something or not, and then how it's done will be the rest of these. But their advice is coming from them. This is exactly what kept us in Afghanistan. So another defense official disputed the notion that Kane, the military's top official, was at odds with the general on major decisions. Absolutely no daylight between Kurilla and Kane. And again, Kane is kind of a no bullshit guy. So both, Kane and Kurilla they seem to be like lifers. So they're not looking at the kind of temporary politics the way Hegseth, I guess, would want them to. Who said that both commanders represent options jointly to Trump. It's a hand-in-glove relationship. Kurilla has an influence unseen in other administrations. Top generals are usually reined in by Pentagon chiefs who push back on their request to balance the global U.S. troop presence. But one of the people familiar with the dynamic between the CENTCOM commander and the Pentagon chief said that they never saw Hegseth turn down a single one of Kurilla's requests for more military assets. And they're not going to. The Pentagon steered a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East this week, two defense officials said, as well as deployments of F-22, F-35, and F-16 fighter planes. This gives the U.S. two aircraft carriers in the region for the second time in a year. A rare move. You know why? Because in the past, if we send somebody there, we keep them there because we have a strategy, we have a plan, we actually know what the fuck is going on and which side of it we're on and what our goal is. Even when it's something like Iraq or Afghanistan, like the idea was around like Iraq, if we had carrier groups in the area, it was to protect shipping lanes from the Houthis, or it was there in case they fired on anybody. We had to do long range strikes from outside their range because we knew their missiles only went so far, right? That's very similar to what would be happening in Iran. So there's no reason why these guys had to be moved out. We're certainly not short on carrier groups actively engaged in battle right now. I mean, they're moving shit around like they're playing fucking Risk. It also takes them from the Pacific, a signal that the Middle East is once again a priority for the administration, even as Pentagon leaders have sought to focus their efforts on China, which means, congratulations, Australia, you're off the hook in terms of AUKUS. We're going to be nice to you again. Kurilla testified last week he had prepared a wide range of options for Hegseth and President Donald Trump to prevent Iran from attaining nuclear weapons. And again, that's what I was saying. Anytime you hear we'll end on this because I know I got to go. Anytime you hear the U.S. had a plan to nuke every baby in a 5-mile radius of the Khomeini's apartment building or whatever, like some terrifying thing like, oh my God, the CIA had a plan for blah, blah, blah. Okay. In peacetime especially, to justify the work and to prepare for the next big awful, military leaders all over the world and intelligence leaders all over the world, and analysts specifically, are given the job of figuring out everything. Anytime people are sitting around with nothing to do, They're going to go, hey, James, go work us out something. Well, we've got all the strike plans. Well, what if Guam gets a nuclear weapon? Well, they're not going to get one. I don't care. Draft it up. We want a file. If it happens, we don't want to be caught off guard. Go write something up. I'm like, oh, fuck. And then later on, that gets leaked out because this guy's bitching about the useless work that he did. So I would argue that if you have heard about a strike plan, it is on the periphery. It is on the edge of ridiculous because the way that people got word of it was people internally and externally thought it's a waste of time. It's stupid. Nobody's ever going to do it. You're making me do something that's never going to happen. So if you hear some extraordinary, like, oh my God, they had a plan, we have a plan to nuke Ukraine or whatever. And it comes out, and you're like, yeah, it was technically when it was still part of Russia and they broke away and they still had nukes. And there was this window where Clinton and those guys were sitting there. So the defense team at that time said, oh shit, what if they went rogue and got all fucking Kosovo on us or something? So Gary, go draft one up. And Gary's like, motherfucker, this is never going to happen. They're already in talks to give up their stuff. They want to be part of Europe. This is a waste of my fucking time. And he, bitches to his wife or to his buddies at the club where they all hang out, where there are members who aren't with clearance. And then that leaks out and somebody goes, oh my God, that's how you hear the peripheral plans. Because the more ridiculous they are, the more apt you are to hear them. Because I got to tell you, the ones that are necessary, clear, part of a regular engagement, are drafted around an actual threat, you don't get to hear about those. Why would you? Because if you hear it, the enemy hears it, and they're a real threat. So they'll keep those on lockdown. But the dumb ones, the ones you're like, this sounds insane, they don't keep on lockdown as much because they are. Because they're not going to happen. Oh, poor Gary. Fuck Gary. He should keep his mouth shut. Just kidding. I don't know why I always make it Gary. It just seems funny. But yeah. So honestly, if you hear of a piece of, even from Snowden or something like that, if you hear something that's like, oh my God, they had a plan to do this, or they had a program to do this, the reason you're hearing about it is because it's absurd. And they were probably never going to pull the trigger on it. I mean, there's differences. The Pentagon Papers would be a great example. And certainly some of the reporting that happened around the Vietnam War, around, like Cold War near misses that we heard about, that, when those things come out, those are because they're genuinely extraordinary. But the issue that, Trump and that crowd has is that there's some real threats out there and loose lips sink ships. So I don't even know that fucking Hegseth knows what's going on. I wouldn't let him know, would you? You're going to get somebody killed. So, okay, this is the White House has backed the military buildup in the region, although some officials noted how easy it's been for Kurilla to make the case why he needs more planes, ships, and air defenses. He's not worried about taking that directly to his civilian superiors. Hegseth has sided with him time and again. Some former officials contend Kurilla's influence is tied more to the nature of his job, the head of the combatant command overseeing the Middle East at a time of crisis. This has little to do with Kurilla himself, said Bilal Saab, who served at the Pentagon. There's no resistance in the Pentagon or the NSC to moving assets to protect troops and personnel in the region, despite his sometimes abrasive character, including the alleged shoving of a military crew member that prompted an Army investigation. The battle-tested and media-averse Kurilla has impressed top officials for his courage. He won a Bronze Star for leading U.S. troops in a firefight in 2005 at the height of the Iraq War, despite having been shot 3 times. CENTCOM said that at the time the officials weren't aware of any investigation into Kurilla. He's got the look of the general that both Hegseth and Trump are looking for. He's a big dude. He's jacked. He's exactly this lethality look they're going for. Officials who have participated in talks with Kurilla about military assets in the region said he also has a knack for convincing others about their importance. Gee, I wonder why Hegseth and Trump like him so much. I mean, I got to tell you, he's apparently mastered the Macron handshake. So, and then on one final note, let me see if I can grab this for you, and then I'll let you guys go. This is the, yeah. Hold on, turn this down. Sorry, loud. Bink, bink, bink. Okay, here we go. So this is the Ayatollah speaking from an undisclosed Ramada Inn in somewhere outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. From the beginning, it was suspected that America had a hand, and again, suspected, whatever, in this wicked act by the Zionist regime. With their recent statements that suspicion grows stronger day by day, that suspicion grows stronger. The Iranian nation stands firmly in the face of this imposed war. It doesn't translate well, I'm guessing. Just as it has stood until now. And it also stands firm in the face of imposed peace. I do not think what you think it means. The Iranians will not yield to anyone's coercion. The Zionist enemy has made a grave mistake and committed a major crime. And again, I have the audio turned off on this, and it must be punished. It is being punished even right now. Recently, the president of the United States has begun to issue threats. I gotta say, pretty boomy room sounds in that place. This is 2025. I'd like to say this is not a video from 1990. He threatened us while speaking in a vulgar and unacceptable manner. Well, welcome to our world, dummy. That's what he always sounds like. Explicitly demanding that Iranian people surrender to him. Yeah, I don't know if that's what he meant. I think he just wrote unconditional surrender as the goal to the world or something, which he apparently thinks he runs as well as the country. Truly astonishing to hear such a thing. Threats have no effect on the mindset or conduct of the Iranian people. Well, they do if somebody has bombs. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I think people change their travel plans if somebody was threatening to blow up American Airlines. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it does. Surrender to what? The Iranians are not a nation that surrenders. I guess except after in 1979 when they surrendered to the Islamic invasion, right? I guess. I mean, I think anybody has the capacity to it. If you're lying to yourself, and so therefore you have to prepare yourself for what you would do in the face of some. Never mind. We have not assaulted anyone, and we will not accept aggression from anyone. Nor will we ever surrender to anyone. This is the logic and spirit of the Iranian people who surrendered to the Islamic regime when they came in 1979, effectively, and have lived under it for all this time, while not being true believers themselves. So, of course, those Americans who are familiar with the politics of this region, like Ted Cruz, know that American involvement in this matter would be entirely to their own detriment. The harm done to America in such a case would be far greater than any harm Iran might face. That only applies if you think you're going to go to the other side. I don't mean politically, I mean law. If the U.S. enters this conflict militarily, we already have, its losses will undoubtedly be irreparable. Its losses will undoubtedly be irreparable. Well, any loss of human life is irreparable, right? That's true of any battle. You can always rebuild buildings, and it's the lives that matter. Okay. Anyways, that was his message, and I know what most of you are thinking. Like, my goodness, how can you not shake in fear, with no pun intended, with a statement as forceful as that from wherever the fuck he is. There's also, I would like to say, hold on. Okay, this is an edited piece of video that's been floating around that says if, let's see if I can do this. That the IRGC commander said that if if Israel drops a nuke, we cannot stand by as the United States and other countries supply Israel with weapons, and our missiles are intercepted by British, French, and U.S. airplanes. Therefore, the scope of the war can become more serious, and we are preparing for this. After your victory, the Americans will come to you on their knees, he's saying to the people, begging to be allowed to invest in Iran as other countries have done. I predict that Islamic Army will be established, an Islamic Army will establish. Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the four big countries will form an Islamic Army that will include other countries too, and it will curtail the dominance of the superpowers over the region. Pakistan has stated, and by the way, this is not true. This is a patched together piece of audio from the Pakistani leader, has stated that if Israel drops a nuclear bomb on Iran, it will drop a nuclear bomb of its own on Israel. Nope. Following Israel's decisive defeat and the unification of Islamic countries, then what? Most Zionists will leave the area, in my opinion. The occupied territories will return to Palestinian hands without any war, except the ones that's already been going on forever. Okay. Yeah, the Pakistani leader did not say that. That's been floating around, especially in right-wing circles lately, as a way to I suppose they think it will scare people off from doing this, when in reality it's making a bunch of right-wingers go, well, Pakistan's next. And India will be our friend. We'll just help India destroy Pakistan. Whee! Right? So I'll leave you guys at that. Later on this afternoon, we will obviously, don't give up on Gary, even though he's a screw-up. I know, Trucker John, I'm trying. Nola, thank you. In Tune, thank you, Michael and Jerry and Charco B. Twice, thank you. And Fred Bear and David, thank you guys for the super chats today and the memberships. Really appreciate it. Yes, Turkey is in NATO. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, Egypt's not going to join in this. The IRGC thinks it's going to take over Egypt. Let's see. Yeah, that'll do for now. I'll be back later to discuss more of this. Thank you guys for joining me. It's HAL Sparks Mornings Mega Worldwide. I want to thank the Major and Phil for being on here. Friday AI will be Rob Glenn is going to be joining us, and perhaps another guest that didn't know. And then, but I will see you this afternoon for our regular show. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. And remember, Donald Trump is
dum 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 dum. Dumb, dumb, stupid. Dumb, silly, stupid, dumb, dumb.
And I made a bunch of new songs. I can't wait to use them on the show. That's all I'm going to tell you. Oh, shit, I forgot. I have to do my end scene alone because I'm in the bunker. This is the bunker set. So it's very different than the other thing, so. Nope, that's the wrong one. Nope. There we go. Okay, I'm out. I'll see you guys this afternoon. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. Emotes. Let me see some emotes. Do it. Twitch people, throw me some emotes and we'll get the credits rolling. They work, hopefully. There we go. Thank you guys so much.
He's a genius, eh?
All I'm offering is the truth. Nothing.
Moon River.
Thank you, Doc.
Ever serve time?
Looking around here, I can tell can't be the king.
Sportos, motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads. They all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.